Saxon Algebra 1, Lesson 16. In this lesson, we study more complicated evaluations. The procedures discussed in Lesson 14 are also used to evaluate more complicated expressions. This time, we will use boxes as our own inclusion symbols when replacing variables with their values. These boxes should be thought of as any other inclusion symbol. We will also replace opposites of variables with the opposites of their values. Here's an example. Evaluate this rather complicated looking expression if p equals -2 and a equals -4. We will first replace each variable with a box. Next, we will substitute the values of the variables in the boxes. We have p is -2, that's highlighted in green, and a is -4, highlighted in red. There are 3 places where the a occurs, so we put the -4 in each of those places, and one place where the p occurs, we put the -2 there. So it looks like this if we write it on paper. Lastly, we will simplify. The -4, I should say opposite of -4, is +4 in front and inside the brackets. -2 is -2, and minus -4 becomes plus the opposite of -4, which is 4. Now we can finish the problem. We have 4 times 4 times 2. We do the innermost parentheses first there. And then we do the brackets. 4 times 2 is 8, so we have 4 times 8, so we have 16. A second example. Evaluate this complicated looking expression if a is -2 and x is -6. This time, we will not use boxes. Instead, we will replace opposite of a with 2 and the opposite of x with 6 as though there are 4 variables. So we have a is -2, the opposite of a is 2, x is -6, and the opposite of x is +6. So we will replace each variable with the corresponding value. A is replaced with -2, x with -6, opposite of a with +2, a with -2 again, and opposite of x with +6. So if we work this out, the -2 times -6 is +12. Inside the brackets we have 2 times -2 plus 6. And the parentheses part there is done first. That gives us 4. So we have 12 times 2 times 4, which is 12 times 8. And that's equal to 96. Example 3. Evaluate ax, bracket opposite of a, parentheses a minus x, if a is -2 and x is -6. As with the previous example, we are going to replace the opposite of a with +2 and the opposite of x with +6 as though there are 4 variables. So a is -2, x is -6, opposite of a is 2, opposite of x is 6. So if we make these replacements, here's what we have. -2 times -6, then the brackets 2 times -2 plus 6. We must do the parentheses inside the brackets first, and then we do the negative 2 times negative 6 outside and get 12. So we have 12 times 2 times 4 here, which is 12 times 8, and that gives us 96. Example 4. This will be our last example. Evaluate this complicated-looking expression if b is negative 4 and c is negative 6. First, we will rewrite all subtraction as addition. That gives us this. Then we will do what we did before. We will consider it as having 4 variables instead of 2 variables. So we have b is negative 4. Opposite of b is positive 4. That occurs in 3 places. C is negative 6. That occurs in 1 place. And opposite of C is positive 6. That also occurs in 1 place. So we make those substitutions. We have 4 wherever we see the opposite of b. Then we have negative 4 where we see b. And 6 where we see the opposite of c. And negative 6 where we see c. So we work out within the parentheses inside the brackets. The negative 4 plus 6 is 2. The negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2, and we have the opposite of that. That's why we have positive 2 there at the end. Then we finish within the brackets. We do the multiplication first. 4 times 2 is 8, so we have 8 plus 2 in the brackets, which is 10 in the brackets. So we have 4 times 10, which is 40. Well, that's the end of Lesson 16. Your assignment is Problem Set 16 on pages 73 and 74 of your book.